Connected Planning in the Post-S&OP era. My guest is Evan Quasney. He is Vice President of Solutions Marketing with Anaplan. Hi, Evan.
How's it going, Bob?
Good, and I just want to ask you about this whole idea of there being a post-S&OP era. Sales and operations planning certainly was a valuable tool for companies for many years. Why do we say we are now in the post-S&OP era?
That's a great question, Bob, and thanks for having me and Anaplan to talk about this a little bit. A lot of what we've seen is S&OP was fantastic at the time that it was used, and it still is a great process. However, the world today has changed. There's a lot more volatility. Certainly, we need to be able to respond and react much more quickly to changes in the market, and planning windows have gotten a lot shorter. And so with all the volatility, all the complexity across different sales channels and the financial implications of the business leaders need to know more sooner about how best a supply chain decision is going to actually impact how they perform for the week, for the month, for the quarter.
Seems like planning is creeping closer and closer to execution in terms of the short windows. The
planning it absolutely
and
has.
the replanning that's involved. So, how can we know what's going to happen 6 months from now or a year from now? Have companies just sort of given up on that, and just going for the short term?
It's a great question. I think a lot of what we've seen is that companies are taking a much more scenario-driven approach. There's a base case, there's a variety of different options and approaches, and it's at different levels of the hierarchy. It could be a long range, it might be a market shift. Short-term tactical, it could be a shortage. And being able to look at those different scenarios and different options as they're going through a weekly, monthly, quarterly planning cycle is, we think, a really critical differentiator that has let our customers be more agile in how they respond and react out in the market as everything's evolving really quickly today.
You're talking about the ability to review a series of what-if scenarios and the like, to simulate the possibilities, the outcome of any given decision.
Absolutely. More what-ifs, the ability to look at different options in advance and come up with a plan so that if something does happen, you're prepared and you're able to act much more quickly in the response.
Of course, philosophically, we're talking about the whole idea that the plan, by definition, is going to be wrong. And so this is a way to make it as less wrong as possible, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so more than just getting your plan in order is this idea that companies now want to use this capability to actually achieve competitive advantage. Tell me how they are doing that, how they're approaching that whole thing.
Well, there are a couple of different approaches that they can take. One of the things that we find really interesting is that supply chain nowadays is so much more than supply chain. There have been a lot of great sessions today talking about growth, talking about revenue, talking about margin. Just this week at the same time, the Gartner CFO conference is going on. Very similar discussions and the implications and the connections between finance and supply chain. And really what we're seeing is that planning in supply chain is the lifeblood of an organization. And the more it's connected with sales, the more it's connected with the workforce, with actual procurement, direct and indirect, gives organizations the ability to look much more broadly and understand the true business impact. And that's where competitive advantage is going to come from. If I can be more agile, if I can get a product to market faster, I'm going to be able to grow faster, I'm going to have better margins, and ultimately I get all that because I've been much more productive and much faster in being able to respond and beat some of my competitors and the product or service level I need to get that out to market faster.
When we talk about planning that's done within the internal organization across a number of functional silos, that itself has always been a challenge. But then again, the plan must be shared with outside partners as well, the so-called single version of the truth. How are companies achieving that today, if for that matter they are at all?
There's a lot of different ways they can go about doing that. Certainly, as supply chain networks have become more complex, it's not just the inbound, but it's also the outbound. Channel sales, distributor models, everything is much different than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. One of the best ways that we've seen customers work through that is how they actually send those signals for the forecasts and provide better visibility at options as you step back through that chain. It's no longer just about the transaction data. It's no longer about sending a file back and forth or making a phone call, but it's actually being able to share some of those options with priority channel partners to give you more confidence, more visibility, and ultimately be able to make a better decision about where to move goods around and make sure you're getting it into the most productive channels for your business.
And in the process, you don't have these fractured plans. You don't have a major supplier with its own forecast that doesn't necessarily agree with yours, and then you're going to have dissonance between the two.
Precisely. What you're ultimately doing is bringing everyone together on a single platform to drive those decisions. And that's what Gartner calls XP&A, we call Connective Planning.
Yeah. Do you believe it's happening on a real-time basis? How fast are we getting access to the necessary information?
It happens, I think, at the speed that it needs to.
Yeah.
If you think about how the market operates, if I'm making long-range plans, new product introductions, I might need to only collaborate on a quarterly basis with my design partners. If I'm looking at retail execution or moving quickly, that's going to be multiple times per day. And being able to tailor that for the right level of how you're trying to be agile, oftentimes what we see is that some companies are trying to better plan or drive more analysis, but it all comes down to execution. Being able, you can translate that decision down to the execution layer. And so the closer you can get to that, the more agile you'll be able to actually drive those scenarios, those decisions you make, right out to the execution area.
So no longer a case of saying, we've done it, we've got our plan, we succeeded. You've got to execute on the plan. That's what everybody's talking about now. You've got to have visibility to the execution as well. So it's still a work in progress though with so many companies, do you feel? Or do you feel like we are really there? The information is there, the data flow is there, the technology is there. Are we on a journey toward that, or have we achieved it?
We still have a ways to go. I think certainly the last few years in the pandemic have shown the need for this now more than ever. And it's heightened the influence that a supply chain leader in the organization have to be able to drive these really powerful business outcomes. One of the other pieces that I also think is really exciting is that every customer, every company has been on a journey. They've made a set of decisions that are important to them. Their business is unique, so should the tools that they use be. And what we're finding more and more is that it's no longer about being able to drive the bespoke activity, but more bringing everything together to make those decisions in a common framework and push those decisions back out across the functions to get to, as we talked about, more competitive, faster decision making.
So we're not throwing out S&OP, even though we're calling it the post-S&OP era, but we are augmenting it with new tools that make it much more effective.
Absolutely not. S&OP as a concept is still here, and it's going to be around for a long time. So what can we do to make it more than S&OP and drive toward XP&A and connected planning?
Thanks for clarifying that, Evan. I really appreciate your insights into planning today and versus yesterday and what we need to do in order to get a good plan that we can execute on. Thanks for that. I do want to take a moment, though, to ask you a little bit about where Anaplan fits into the picture. What are you guys bringing to market that helps to achieve what we've been talking about here?
That's a great question. So Anaplan as a company is all about connected planning, what we've been talking about, it really helping advance past S&OP into integrated business planning and even to XP&A. Gartner's term for connected planning. And where we really fit is helping bridge from the operational decision making that's taking place in all those functions and outside at suppliers and customers, and connecting that all the way into the financial implications, working across finance, supply chain, sales, workforce, procurement, IT marketing, and helping organizations ultimately make better decisions that drive growth and drive margin.
Absolutely essential to go that much deeper in the whole planning process and actually, as we said before, execute on the plan. Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
I've been speaking with Evan Quasney of Anaplan. Thank you very much for watching.